cannot let the other nation to talk about their views of human rights. There is no one-way solution to the human rights.
Right.
It depends to the color of the people, but we can have single formula. The formula, like in algebraic, we say a plus b in power of 2, there is one answer. But if you change a and b and put it a, for example, c plus d, you follow same formula, same approach.
I was never really good with math.
Same, but C and D is different from A and B.
Yeah.
At least if we have the same unit structure.
I think the point you're making, which is an important one, is there shouldn't be one human rights standard.
A standard, that's right.
Right?
And definition.
Like I said, different strokes for different folks.
That's right. For example, in Iran, we don't accept the gay problem. If you are gay, there is a home. You can go to your home and exercise in your gay exercises. For those people who are physically really gay, okay?
And you force them to become women.
Make them women.
So sometimes women will say, listen, we want to go outside when we want to go outside.
Yeah.
And some cultures will say, well, that's not proper. And we should respect that.
You respect that.
Because everybody has a different view on how...
Some women that you are fighting for their rights, they like this kind of stuff.
In America, there's all these gay rights, there's all these women rights, and in Iran, hey, not so much, and that's cool.
Yeah.
Because that is the way you guys are.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's why I think it's so fabulous that the UN was able to honor President Ahmadinejad at this human rights conference.
And listen to him.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, I appreciate
I feel now very close to you.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
It was very nice. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You like my shirt?
Yeah, it's very nice.
It's not too gay, right?
No, it's very beautiful.
Okay,
very beautiful.
Hello? No, nobody here.
How can Kofi Annan embrace somebody who is actively violating the UN resolutions?
They have an institutional difficulty with determining that one side is the aggressor and one side isn't.
The UN member states have not been able to agree upon a definition of terrorism. Like pornography, you might not be able to define it, but you know it when you see it.
In the case of those countries which very obviously do not comply because they do not want to comply, we go there, we talk to them.
The government that was committing the genocide was sitting on the Security Council.
Give me a break. The UN is not willing to say this is genocide because they might offend someone?
You have some IAEA officials in Iran today that are trying to help the Iranians make the Bushehr reactor work well.
Syria can serve as a member on the UN Security Council.
Zimbabwe on the Human Rights Commission.
Libya as the chair.
Uzbekistan and Burma.
North Korea, Iran.
Why are there so many crappy countries here?
No country is perfect.
Hello. Hello. No matter how they toss genocide going on. This summer, I'll take you on a journey to uncover the secrets.
We're not on the side.
Behind the world's most powerful institution. And just maybe, make a few friends along the way. Or not. One of the primary human rights issues in the world right now is Darfur. So I went to a rally for Darfur to get the scoop on how much progress was being made at the conference. How many times the agenda for this conference was Sudan and Darfur on the agenda?
Sudan and Darfur did not make the agenda of this conference.
What is happening in Sudan? What are we doing about the genocide in Darfur?
And the chairman banged on the gavel and said, sorry, we're not going to talk about these issues here. I found some Sudanese delegates. I wanted to get their version of what was going on.
In Darfur, it's a conflict which resulted from environmental degradation. Because there are people who are
climate change?
Climate change.
The climate change.
So you guys are basically just a bunch of tree huggers.
They clashed over shrinking resources as a result of the climate change, which is caused by you.
Me? What the hell did I do?
It has to do with the wider conflict in the region, Arab-Israeli conflict.
In the Middle East.
So you're the Arab-Israeli conflict has something to do with Sudan?
With Sudan, yes.
So climate change.
Climate change.
Arab-Israeli conflict.
Exploited. Climate change resulted in the conflict, as I told you, and exploited by factors which are alien to us.
So American car drivers are responsible for Darfur.
Another factor is that there is a conflict between China and USA.
Right.
On the resources, economic.
What are you smiling at? So climate change is one factor. Yes. Arab-Israeli conflict another one. The Yankee-Boston Red Sox rivalry is also a factor?
Climate change is the root cause.
But you're promising me that Sudan is not going into Darfur and slaughtering Darfurians.
No, I promise you.
How does the United Nations treat you, the Sudanese? They treat you well, though?
Yes.
And the UN agrees with your assessment?
Yes, this is what Ban Ki-moon himself said 2 years ago when he came to office.
Well, at least he got one fact right. I guess what these people just don't get is that because it's the weather that's shooting all these people and burning down their villages, the issue of Darfur has no place in the UN's Human Rights Conference. Welcome to UNRWA.
What I'm worried about with UNRWA is they have a cavalier attitude towards terror. They're sympathetic to many of the political parties that support terror.
UNRWA was peopled by officials who were terribly, terribly sympathetic to Hamas and other extremist Palestinian organizations.
Oh, I'm sure that there are Hamas members on the UNRWA payroll, and I don't see that's a crime.
It may not be a crime, but wouldn't the taxpayers of the world be disturbed by the office of this UN staffer, who hung suicide bomber tributes on his wall? Personally, I prefer pictures of my kids. Or the UN allowing the use of its vehicles for terrorist getaways.
UNRWA has a very poor idea of where its resources are used, or, for example, whether its vehicles are used in terrorist attacks. We have seen tapes of vehicles clearly marked on the roof as UNRWA vehicles with RPG weapons being loaded to carry out attacks.
So the UN is directing our tax dollars to decorate offices and fund ambulance ride-alongs. In my research, I have read that UNRWA employs terrorists or is intimately linked with terrorism.
I don't think they are. No, I would have to look into that. No, I don't think they are close to. No.
Welcome to UNRWA.
This is the most poorly run international organization I have ever seen. I have never seen a leadership staff as incompetent as this one.
And he works in Congress.
UNRWA has a total budget of about $470 million. And of that, we give about $140 million. UNRWA can't tell us who gets U.S. taxpayer money. Their audit simply says cash assistance to people in the Gaza Strip, $300,000. And there is no ability to know who is getting what payment. It's a policy of don't tell, don't ask.
Welcome to UNRWA.
UNRWA distributed textbooks that taught hatred. UNRWA ran classrooms that taught hatred, that taught jihad, that taught war.
The brainwashing of a new generation to teach them jihad and to teach them that their highest goal in life is to be a suicide bomber.
ممكن في يوم من الأيام تتصوروا إنه يصير سلام وتعايشوا وانتم طرف ثاني؟ نعم.
لا مستحيل يعني لا إنه لا جهاد نصر أو استشهاد. إما الواحد يضل يجاهد تمنى يا إما حتى النصر أو إنه يستشهد.
At least their schools are teaching kids some good old-fashioned cheers. There you have it. Check out our movie's website, youandmemovie.com. Take care.
How we have been using diplomacy so far with Iran, you genius.
What we need here is diplomacy, ladies and gentlemen. We are civilized people. We are not brutal animals, knuckle-dragging apes. We're not warmongers. We are intelligent people with feelings and emotions, and we need to talk to these people to see how we can work out an agreement. It's worked so well in the past. So much victory, so much success. Let us see what John Bolton, the former ambassador to the UN, had to say about Iran. We know, the hardliner. See how easy it was for the hardliner to deal with Iran, Yes, we know. He caused us much friction. Well, let's see.
Throughout George W. Bush's presidency, Iran's nuclear weapons ambitions were a constant problem. Iran's goals never changed, but the administration's goals were too often in flux, and not pursued as consistently or as relentlessly as they might have been. Whether, after his re-election, President Bush wavered personally remains unknown, but too many of his subordinates did, and he allowed them to do so. I certainly did not accomplish what I wanted to do on Iran. I was not able to convince enough people above me of the seriousness of Iran's threat. Finally, time just ran out on me as I left state. I first saw Iran's proliferation efforts through the prism of creating a new strategic framework with Russia. When we raised the subject of Iran's aggressive nuclear weapons and ballistic missile programs during our negotiations with the Russians, they said unequivocally they were just as worried about Iran as we were. The administration was also debating how to administer various sanctions statutes, such as the Iraq-Iran Non-Proliferation Act of 1992 and the Iran-Libya Sanctions Act of 1996, which had withered and almost died for lack of use under Clinton. I pressed for vigorous enforcement of these laws, but met unrelenting bureaucratic opposition. As the February 15, 2002 Principals Committee meeting on our Treaty of Moscow negotiations ended, Condoleezza Rice raised the Russia-Iran proliferation issue. Colin Powell let me advance my idea to tell Russia we weren't even prepared to discuss the nuclear power plant they were building for Iran at Bushehr, or possible U.S.-Russian cooperation on nuclear matters until they ceased all WMD and advanced conventional weapons relations with Iran. If they weren't willing to do so in a way that gave us confidence they were adhering to their commitments, I explained, there really wasn't much to talk about. Rice said, well, John has certainly put this in a different way. What do we think about it? I like that approach. Vice President Dick Cheney said, I agree with the way John would approach it. That's really exactly right. Secretary of Defense Don Rumsfeld still wasn't buying, but Rice said, John's going to be in Moscow on Monday, and he needs instructions, Don. Can you at least agree that John can open conversations with the Russians? Rumsfeld was still grousing when Cheney laughed and said, come on, this is Bolton. He's tough. Rumsfeld finally smiled and said, oh, all right, as the meeting broke up. Within the Russian government, there were various opinions on Iran. Alexander Ryumantsev, head of the Ministry of Atomic Energy, said there simply was no cooperation with Iran on weapons-related matters, a position the Russians adhered to consistently. Yuri Koptev, Director General of Rosaviacosmos, their equivalent of NASA, stoutly denied his agency had any dealings with Iran and said we should bring any information to the contrary to his intention. Ryumyantsev's and Koptev's responses sounded reasonable, but they posed difficult problems for us given our concern not to compromise sensitive intelligence sources and methods, which could be revealed simply by the nature of the information we might disclose. I certainly didn't want to disclose intelligence promiscuously, which too many others at State had done many times before, but to develop better